The Speaker's Corner, fittingly, I think, is in the collective intelligence section of this Biennale, and it's really a gathering place as well as a space and a platform for conversations, workshops, and debates with a focus on architectural practice and in particular architecture criticism. And in fact, the genesis or inspiration for the project was the inclusion in the inaugural Architecture Biennale in 1980, directed by Paolo Portoghesi, of a number of influential critics and historians. So Portoghesi invited Charles Jenks, Vincent Scully, who was a historian and critic and professor of mine at Yale University many years ago, and Christian Norberg Schultz, to install an installation called the Critics' Corner or Critics' Exhibition, which was an exploration of critical practice. But beyond that, Portoghesi also invited these three figures to form the organizing committee to help set the larger agenda for that inaugural Biennale. And in fact, the group included a fourth originally, Kenneth Frampton, but he, after some disagreements with the group about the philosophical direction of that Biennale, decided not to participate. I was fascinated as a critic myself to realize that criticism was present at the creation of the Architectural Biennale, as it were, and then sort of banished or exiled, never to return, or at least never to return in that form. And this is something that I never knew. I discovered the Critics' Exhibition and the details about it while I was reviewing a newish biography of Vincent Scully written by Krista Sykes, which came out a couple of years ago. And I was fascinated to realize that I had never, as a critic myself, never known about this component of the first Architecture Biennale. The state of architecture criticism is in extreme flux, I would say. It's too easy to say that architecture criticism is in crisis because, in fact, the history of architecture criticism is a history of crises or a history of kind of existential angst about criticism's place vis-a-vis the discipline, vis-a-vis exhibitions like this one. I think there is a particular kind of challenge, though, now, and a particular shift that's happening for two reasons. One is because of digital production and distribution of criticism. That, on the one hand, has democratized the field in some very beneficial ways. It has lowered the barriers to entry for younger critics or voices from outside of the mainstream or outside of traditional institutions or outside of traditional regions that have dominated discourse in places like the Biennale, which is to say an axis between Europe and North America and Japan perhaps, and has been able to invite other parts of the world to directly participate in this conversation. The price to pay for this democratization and this lowering of boundaries and the fact that there are fewer gatekeepers is that the models for sustained critical practice over a career are very, very uncertain now, and perhaps as uncertain as they've ever been. So to use my own example, I was a critic for most of my career at the Los Angeles Times. I had the kind of institutional support which allowed me to travel, which allowed me to write regularly about subjects like the urbanism of Los Angeles. And those kinds of institutional platforms, and I would add also academic ones, are either faltering or going away. So it's a moment of reconstitution, and the conversations that we've been having are about precisely how we restage or reconstitute criticism given these conditions. The second element of this change is the climate crisis, and what it means to write, as we traditionally have, about individual buildings by prominent architects. That has traditionally been the core, and perhaps a conservative core, but a core of architectural criticism as it's been defined for many decades. And it can feel wholly inadequate to think of defining architectural criticism that way in the face of the climate crisis.